greke për dhe Open Society Foundation në Shqipëri, çfarë thotë është fqinj në këtë rajon. Marrëdhëniet mund të vështrohen me fjalët e Sofokliut, që thoshte që duhet të kemi besim tek njëri tjetër, prandaj vendet tona, Greqia dhe Shqipëria, do të investojnë më tepër gjithmonë më shumë në frymën e besimit. Në këtë kontekst, ky anketim i bashkë në Greqi dhe në Shqipëri është një interes të madh. Me një koment të vogël, do doja të jap fjalën zotit Gjosh Pagoulatos, drejtori i përgjithshëm i Fondacionit Hellenic për politikat evropiane dhe të jashtme. Profesor Pagoulatos, fjala është për ju. Faleminderit Erzani shumë, do doja t'ju uroja mirëseardhjen në këtë aktivitet. ELIAMEP dhe përmes programit të Evropës Perëndimore ka një prani të gjatë në Balkanin Perëndimor, sidomos në Shqipëri përmes kërkimeve tona, ndërhyrjeve tona në forumet greke dhe ndërkombëtare dhe partneritetin tonë me organizatat shqiptare, dhe kemi përshtatur gjithmonë pikpamjen dhe perspektivën shqiptare të Shqipërisë dhe gjithë Ballkanit Perëndimor. Ky vizion i organizimit të gjithë Evropës Perëndimore është një qëllim politik i ndar i qeverisë shqiptare dhe asaj greke. ELIAMEP ka qenë shumë mbështetëse shumë e madhe e këtij objektivi politik dhe patjetër këto kanë shtyrë në zgjedhjen e marrëdhënieve dypalëse midis dy vendeve, dhe Athina dhe Tirana kanë arritur një marrëveshje të madhe për sa i përket kufirit në detin e Ionit, dhe me këtë Shqipëria i ka dhënë një shembull vendeve anëtare dhe vendeve të mundshme anëtare se si të zgjidhen problematikat duke ndërtuar partneritet, duke respektuar drejtën ndërkombëtare. Në këtë kontekst, Greqia mbështet realisht perspektivën europiane dhe patjetër mbështesim leadershipin dhe gjithashtu popullin shqiptar, siç do të tregohet në rezultatet e asaj që do të thuhet
will bring security and prosperity to its people. But bilateral relations in that context.
Dhe në këtë kontekst është me të vërtetë e rëndësishme që të kuptojmë se si qytetarët vlerësojnë marrëdhëniet dypaqe, përqëmëritë të tyre dhe se si i shohin sfidat e perceptuara për të ardhmen. Duhet të bërë goxha punë bazuar në njohuritë e politika, por gjithashtu dimensionet e njohurisë publike dhe patjetër fqinjësia e mirë dhe marrëdhëniet e mira do të jenë të rëndësishme për të ardhmen e dy vendeve. Ne me të vërtetë besim plot se raporti që do të prezantojmë sot në partneritet me Fondacionin Shoqëria e Hapur për Shqipërinë do të japë kontribut të madh për njohuri edhe për bërë kuptim më të mirë midis dy kombeve tona. Faleminderit. Profesor Pagoulatos, faleminderit shumë. Do të jap fjalën tani zotit Andi Dobrushi, koordinator rajonal për Ballkanin Perëndimor dhe drejtor ekzekutiv i Fondacionit Shoqëria e Hapur për Shqipërinë. Zotit Dobrushi, fjala është për ju. Faleminderit Erzani shumë Alexandra, mirëditë të gjithëve dhe mirë se erdhët në këtë aktivitet në internet. Me të vërtetë shpresojmë që me verën dhe pas verës të kemi mundësi të bëjmë këto fizikisht dhe personalisht, por shpresojmë që
that will follow up the very interesting findings of that we're going to discuss today. As Mr. Pagoulatos mentioned in his speech, in his presentation, Albania and Greece have had their up and downs, and despite these political up and downs and challenges in the past between the two countries, Greece remains an important partner in Albania's Euro-Atlantic integrations, democratic transition, including the important economic investments and assistance, as well as supporting in the international scene, as it was the case when Albania joined NATO back in 2009. From the very early days of transition journey, Greece represented also for many Albanians a great opportunity in terms of employment and economic stability for the mutual benefit of both countries. This event, no doubt, is taking place in a very complex context as the region and the world beyond are recovering slowly after the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, the last research on the relationship between two countries came out more than 7 years ago, and today we are living in a very different world. Unfortunately, the gap and space is filled either by tabloids or mainstream media, leaving behind a confusing and incorrect perception of the relationships between the two neighbors. And that is why I strongly believe that this event is very timely, and it will hopefully be only the first step in a long series of events and gatherings that will not only measure perceptions, but they'll contribute to creating and contributing through facts and evidence a different narrative that can help to strengthen and develop a meaningful relationship and shape, why not, also respective policies of the countries. It is our role, I believe, to make sure that the relationships between our countries are not measured only by the political temperatures, but above all by the strong links that exist and have to be nurtured at all levels, whether they are economic, social, education, or cultural ties. It is in this context that the Open Society Foundation of Albania teamed up with Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy to explore these factors by revisiting the sensitive and difficult relationship between Albania and Greece. The first step of this joint effort was to explore the societal base for mutual misperceptions and stereotypes. And the aim was to understand the attitudes that the Albanian and Greek people hold about each other and how these opinions may facilitate or obstruct the building of a closer partnership between the two countries. To that end, and as a first step in a broader effort at increasing mutual understanding, the research project aims to delve deeper and the various dimensions of this complex relationship. In the end, I would like to thank very much ELIAMEP, Ioannis, particularly for his commitment and perseverance in the project, despite very difficult times that we've been in the past year, as well as the team on the panelists for putting together, I think, a very fine show for today. So I'm delighted to give the floor to the rest of the team. So thank you so much, and all the good successes for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobrushi. Now, Greece's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nikos Dendias, has sent a pre-recorded message with his remarks. We warmly thank him for that. We may now watch the video. Thank you. I think we have some technical problems. Are we ready now to watch the video? Okay, obviously we have a technical problem with a video message of Greece's Foreign Minister, Mr. Dendias. We will fix the problem. So I would like to give now the floor to Mr. Alexandros Bouzis, Head of Public Diplomacy at the Embassy of Greece in Tirana. Mr. Bouzis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon to all participants from hot Tirana. The name is Bouzis and not Bouzis, and it's okay. I'm also looking forward to scrutinize and evaluate the findings of this joint parallel opinion poll research held by the two prestigious institutions. And I must say that for those of us who work in the public diplomacy sector, such research projects are valuable tools that can facilitate our job. We usually say that, and I think it is a fact, that relations between Greece and Albania are really close and that they extend to a particularly wide range of sectors. From the economy and politics to culture, the two neighboring peoples live interconnected lives. However, what is undisputable is that the jewel in the crown of Greek-Albanian relationship is the human factor. The interpersonal relations between the two peoples prevail upon every other sector of cooperation. In fact, there are so many social exchanges between ordinary people at all levels of everyday life. From one side, the Greek minority in Albania, and from the other side, the Albanian immigrants in Greece, they have both created and maintain a highway of exchanges between the two countries. Nevertheless, we see that misperceptions, mentalities, and stereotypes of the past survive and are still reproduced through mass media and social networks. I'm not saying that issues do not exist, but the thing is that perceptions and stereotypes produce real, tangible results. They affect reality itself. Our job is to go beyond those perceptions, or rather misperceptions, overcome stereotypes of the past, and build an environment of trust through a positive agenda for our common European future. I would like to share with you a recent experience we had here in Tirana. It was less than 2 weeks ago that we inaugurated a park here in Tirana, the Hellenic Park, Parku Hellen. It is a modern, elegant park for entertainment, sports, and cultural activities by the Lake Farka. It was offered by our embassy, the Greek embassy, to the people of Tirana. 2 days after the inauguration, we held there at the Hellenic Park a Tiranathlon, a triathlon competition with athletes from many different countries, neighboring or not. During those two events, we saw people from different backgrounds, citizens of Tirana, participating and celebrating with us with true enthusiasm. We saw spontaneous expression of friendship and also lots of positive publicity that I should stress that this positive publicity exceeded all our expectations.
Ky publicitet pozitiv i te kaloi të gjitha përshmërit tona. Ajo që dua të them është që gjithë ata njerëz nuk janë të imun nga percepcione apo percepcione apo stereotipeve, ata patjetër jetojnë në të njëjtën shoqëri, por ata ishin të gatshëm të
was right, the opportunity was right, the place was right, or just because it's high time. It's just high time. Let's think about it. I do not want to take much more time. I'm also waiting for the experts and the analysis of the findings, and I would like to congratulate the two prestigious institutions for the effort they made. Thank you very much.
We thank you, Mr. Bouzis, and I do apologize for the mistake.
No,
for
okay.
surname. And thank you for the example that you gave with the park in Tirana. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Maklen, Misha, advisor at the Ministry for European and Foreign Affairs of Albania. Mr. Misha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And hello, everybody. And thank you for this opportunity to address the session. First of all, I want to congratulate both organizations for conducting this survey and the study on Greek-Albanian relations and the perceptions of our citizens about each other. Relations between Albania and Greece, between Albanians and Greeks, have often been the subject of speculation. They are sort of shrouded in myth more often than not. Public discourse on these relations relies on subjective interpretations rather than hard data or professional studies like one conducted by your organizations. So surveys like these are very welcome precisely because they allow a glimpse into the real state of the perceptions of our citizens. I remember in 2007, when I was still in civil society, I worked on a survey on the perceptions of Albanians on the European Union. And one of the questions concerned Greece. And I must admit, I was really surprised because the responses showed that the perceptions of Albanians about Greece and the Greek people were much more positive than one would have thought, judging from anecdotal evidence or even media reports at the time. I'm happy that this survey once more confirms this fact. It confirms that there is a far greater positive feeling between our people than one would have thought, judging from these subjective expressions, especially in the online media. And it seems to show too that there is a disconnect between the old narrative that was perhaps true in the 90s, in the 1990s, and which is still present in the media or online forums to a certain extent, and the true perceptions of our people. But while the survey's findings in general are positive, the really important finding in my view is that an overwhelming majority of Albanians and Greeks attach an above average importance to developing cooperation between our countries. Albania and Greece, or rather the Albanian and Greek people, have been neighbors for a very, very long time. And when you've been neighbors for so long, you're bound to have a complicated relationship. A relationship with its ups and downs, its good moments and its bad moments. That has certainly been the case in our history. What is important, however, is that, especially in recent years, the trend has been positive. Relations have been moving in the right direction. I can say that relations have grown more mature, more pragmatic, and more constructive. Albania and Greece have gradually started to talk to each other, even about subjects that were once considered taboo. In other words, relations have slowly started to shift from the emotional to the rational. They are being viewed through the lens of shared interests. Look at the decision, for instance, agreed upon by both our countries to refer the issue of delimitation of maritime spaces to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. This tendency to look ahead and cooperate for the sake of shared interests is not true just about Albanian-Greek relations. To a large extent, this is true about our region as a whole. If you compare, for instance, the Western Balkans of the 1990s with the wars and ethnic cleansing campaign to the Western Balkans of the Berlin process, which are talking and working on connectivity, human relations, a common regional market plan, it is a remarkable transformation. I almost think that if we were to transport somehow a politician from the 1990s to the second decade of the 21st century, he or she would be in shock and most probably would accuse a lot of our leaders about treason. The visit by Prime Minister Rama to Greece, the upgrade of our relationship through the Declaration of Strategic Partnership have given new momentum to the relationship between our countries. The assistance that Greece provided after the earthquake of 2019, and especially the symbolic visit by Foreign Minister Dendias in the earthquake's immediate aftermath, were very important in giving further strength to the narrative of friendship and cooperation. Of course, issues remain. Despite the remarkable progress, issues remain between Albania and Greece, just as they remain in the broader region. The failure of the EU to advance the integration of Albania and North Macedonia was, after all, caused by an intervention of history. Our region has not yet kicked the habit completely of producing too much history. There are still issues that make our relationship complicated and at times perhaps emotional. There are still remnants of our complicated relationship expressed in issues such as the law on the state of war, which bears no relationship to the reality of relations between our countries, since we are both NATO members, we have a treaty of friendship, and on top of that, Greece is Albania's second most important economic partner. But while these issues remain and may well take some time to resolve, there is no reason why our countries should not look forward to an intensification of our relations for the sake of our shared interests, just as Greece did, for instance, when it adopted a strategic approach to the integration of Albania and North Macedonia, refusing to allow history to intervene for the sake of a greater strategic interest for Greece and for the entire region. So I thank you once again for your good work, and I can only hope that this survey and this study is but the first in a series of studies, because I think that through such studies and the empirical data they provide, we can actually do a lot to promote more constructive and closer relations between our people by squeezing out the space for subjective interpretations and emotional interpretations of our history. Thank you.
I think we all strongly agree with that. Mr. Misha, thank you so much for your welcoming remarks. And I think it's time to watch the pre-recorded message of Greece's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nikos Dendias.
Pleasure that I'm addressing this event, an event of particular interest on the public perception about the bilateral relations between Greece and Albania. And I thank you for your invitation. Greece and Albania share a lot more than a common border. They are bound by historical ties that are lost in time, bringing our two peoples even closer together. This is most vividly illustrated in the shape of the indigenous Greek national minority in Albania, the largest in the country, which enriches the Albanian society. At the same time, in the hundreds of thousands of Albanian citizens who live and prosper in Greece and are well integrated in the multicultural Greek society. These are two factors that constitute a solid bridge of friendship which has greatly contributed to the strengthening of our cooperation on multiple levels. The aim is to reach the full potential of our relations. A truly great step in this direction was our mutual decision to refer the issue of the delimitation of our exclusive economic zones to the International Court of Justice. This decision is exemplary. It shows how important issues can be resolved when both parties involved are focused on upholding international law and good neighborly relations. And I'm particularly satisfied that Prime Minister Mitsotakis and Prime Minister Rama have recently agreed to speed up consultations at legal experts level. I also wish to reiterate that Greece is constantly focused on supporting Albania in its path towards accession to the European Union. I'm aware that the failure to hold an intergovernmental conference with the European Union during the first semester of this year has created some disillusionment among the Albanian society. But it remains our strong conviction that the future of Albania belongs to the European Union. In this spirit, we will continue to provide assistance, among other things, by way of our know-how accumulated through our European Union membership. Of course, we're aware that our bilateral cooperation has a direct impact on so many lives on both sides of the borders. As our societies and economies recover from the pandemic's repercussions, Greece has endeavored to improve access to vaccines for Albania, not only through its participation in the Rescue European Union mechanism, but also by directly delivering a first installment of 20,000 doses of vaccines to Tirana. More deliveries will follow in the next weeks. Dear friends, I share your interest in today's presentation of the report's finding on public attitudes. Our peoples have so much in common, and people-to-people contacts are all the more meaningful in our fragile neighborhood. I wish to emphasize the critical role of education and mass media in shaping public perceptions at each side of the border. It is of paramount importance to eradicate negative stereotypes, particularly within the younger generation. We should focus on issues that bring our peoples together. With these few words, I would like to commend our hosts as well as those who have worked for this public opinion survey. I wish that its findings contribute to building more understanding and more cooperation between the Greek and the Albanian societies. Thank you so much for your attention. It is with great pleasure.
And with the message of Greece's Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias, and we warmly thank him for this, we came to a close of the welcoming remarks of today's event. And now the time has come, the time that we're all waiting for the findings of the surveys conducted both in Greece and Albania. And I would like to welcome now Mr. Ioannis Armakolas, Senior Research Fellow, Head of Southeast Program at ELIAMEP, and Alketa Berzani, former Executive Director of the Data Centrum Research Institute, that will explain the findings of the research. Good afternoon to both.
Thank you, Alexandra. I think we need to see the PowerPoint presentation. I will start and Alketa will follow. So while we are waiting, maybe I will, in 2 sentences, explain the rationale behind the study. As Andi Dobrushi mentioned earlier, this is the second time we hold two parallel opinion polls between Greece and Albania. The previous one was several years ago in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So, and many things have changed since. So it's important to understand what's happening. Specific developments, both within each of the countries and between the two countries, and also more broadly in the context of European integration or international relations. And this is not, of course, of any merely academic interest, but it has a very specific and very important also policy implications. Our Minister, Mr. Dendias, mentioned that it's very important for the two societies to eradicate negative stereotypes, but before politicians and civil society facilitate the eradication of stereotypes, we need to understand the stereotypes between the two societies. We need to know what citizens think. And this is not an era, of course, of top-down politics. It's an era where both politicians and grassroots citizens and civil society play a role in politics. So this is the rationale. This is the aim of the study we did with Open Society Foundation of Albania, with the help of the Data Centrum polling agency in Tirana, and the public opinion research unit at the University of Macedonia, led by our colleague George Siakas. And we can move now to the next slide to give just very briefly the context of the study, or rather the methodology of the study. It's a national level survey in both countries with national representative sample. And the two studies were held a long time ago, but the delay in the presenting the findings is because of the pandemic, of course. The data collection happened in December 2019 in Greece, and in February 2020 in Albania by University of Macedonia and Data Centrum, respectively. Next slide, please. We will start with a more general contextual outlook of the relations with neighboring countries, what Greeks and what Albanians think about their country's relations with neighbors. And as you will see throughout this presentation, on the left side, typically on the left side, you will have the red, this guy there in the red jumper and the red graph, which represents the findings from the Albanian poll. And on the right side, and the guy in the blue and the guy in the blue shirt is represents the findings from the Greek poll. And we will try as briefly as possible to present the comparative findings. So starting with the question of, we asked the respondents in both countries about their international friendships. I mean, do they feel that they have a best friend in international affairs? Which country is their best friend? And what we find is Albanians are quite extrovert and perceive many more countries to be friends of Albanians, or friends of Albania, compared to Greeks, who both in this case and in other opinion polls we have done over the years appear to be more introvert and do not feel that they have too many friends in international affairs. In the case of Albania, we have the USA, Germany, EU, Italy, and also Greece in the 5th place of international friends. In the case of Greece, we have only France with almost 30%. And then further down, EU is second with 10%, and then other countries with smaller percentages. So you will see 1 in 4 Greeks say there is no international friend for Greece, and then 10%, 1 in 10 Greeks think they don't know the answer to this, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Then the next question was an extremely important question we always pose in our polls. If there is a perception of threat among citizens, do citizens feel there is a foreign country, there is a foreign threat directed against their country? And here again, we see quite a big divergence between the perceptions in Greece and Albania. In the case of Albania, most Albanians, actually 3 out of 4 Albanians do not feel there is an external threat against their country. There's no country that is actually threatening Albania. And then there is a smaller percentage of Albanians, about 1 in 4, 26%, that feel there is some country that threatens Albania, and most of the people responded that this country is Serbia. What is important for our analysis is that the perception of a threat from Greece is very low, close to, it's around 3%, which is extremely low, of course. Now, in the case of Greece, the picture is quite different, as you can imagine. 8 out of 10 Greeks, well, 9 out of 10 Greeks think there is Greece is under threat by a foreign country. And out of these, almost the overwhelming majority think that the threat comes from Turkey. And there are very small percentages of other countries. And as you will see, Albania does not register at all as a threat. So Greeks do not feel that they are threatened by Albania, by Albania. Next slide, please. Now, how do Albanians and Greeks view the neighborhood, our Balkan neighborhood? Here again, we find Albanians being much more extrovert in the sense that they have a positive opinion, positive view of most of the countries in the region, with the exception of Serbia, which has more negative views than positive. So as you will see, 95% of Albanians have positive view of Kosovo, 94% have positive views of Italy, and then Turkey with 84%, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Greece also. 6 out of 10 Albanians have positive view of Greece. In the case of Greece, of Greek respondents, most of the neighboring countries are not seen in a positive light. Turkey comes first here as overwhelmingly seen negatively by Greeks, but also Bulgarians have mostly neutral perceptions. Perceptions of Bulgaria are mostly neutral. North Macedonia mostly either negative or neutral, very limited positive perceptions. Albania also, as you will see here, most Greeks either have neutral view of Albania or negative view of Albania. And the only countries in the broader region that Greeks see in a positive light, Serbia and Israel. Israel, I would say it's more recent because of changes in the geopolitics of East Mediterranean. Serbia is more traditional country that is seen by Greeks in a positive light. And if we go to the next slide, a similar picture here. We asked the respondents to tell us which countries they would like to develop relations with. Here again, Albanians want to have better relations with most countries in the region, with Kosovo, Italy, Turkey, Greece, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and the only country that they don't want to see more relations with is Serbia. In the case of Greece, it's a similar situation to the previous slide. Greece would like to see more relations with Serbia and Israel. And then the rest of the countries are kind of somewhere in the middle. I mean, some want to have more relations with, others not. So not very positive overall, or maybe more neutral, I would say, with the exception of Serbia and Israel. And then next slide, I will give the floor to my colleague Alketa.
So the two polls also measured some views and attitudes of both citizens of Greece and Albania about the European Union. And we'll now present the main findings in this regard. Next slide, please. There is no surprise for some of us that Albanians have a highly positive perception on the European Union, with 9 out of 10 Albanians perceiving European Union actually as a good thing. At the other hand, the Greek citizens are somewhat more skeptical. The positive perception about EU from the Greek citizens are about 4 out of 10 of them, and another 4 out of 10 have some neutral, let's say, perception, considering EU neither good or bad for them. Next slide, please. When asked again about their views on European Union being a place of convergence or cooperation, or a place where the powerful impose their interests, again, Albanians have a much more positive interpretation. They strongly believe EU is a place of convergence and cooperations, with 2 out of 3 Albanians confirming that. While we have an opposite perception from the Greek citizens, 6 out of 10 of them actually perceive European Union to be a place where the powerful impose their interest, and only 17.5% of them actually perceive European Union as a place of convergence and cooperation. And definitely there is no surprise now, considering the findings that we just shared, that Albanians strongly support and they are looking forward to Albania becoming soon an European Union member. And this, let's say, wish is from 9 out of 10 Albanians, while Greeks are divided in their support to Albanian support of candidacy for a European Union. Only half of them actually support such candidacy, and the other half actually do not. We also ask Albanians and Greek citizens about the Greek government support toward the Albanians' EU perspective. And here we do have an agreement between both nations. Approximately two-thirds of both Albanian and Greek citizens, actually they do agree with the fact that the Greek government has supported Albania in its European perspective and journey so far. Next slide. Now, definitely we are here to talk more about Albanian and Greece relations, and we'll start understanding some of the general overview on that regard. The first question is about the current situation and what are the perception of both nations about the existing relations in the current situation. And we can see from the charts, like previously mentioned from Ioannis, on the left side, you'll see the results from the Albanian poll, and in the right side of the screen, you'll see the results from the Greek poll. We do see here, or from the results, that actually 57% of Albanians perceive that the current situation, it is positive. The relations between the two countries and societies are positive, while half of the Greeks actually are more inclined in being, let's say, neutral to such relation. And only 1 in 3 of them consider that the actual situation is positive between the two countries. Next slide, please. But both, let's say, Greeks and Albanians actually agree on the fact that the relations have improved in the recent decade, with approximately half of each nation supporting this claim. And an interesting fact as well, it is the fact that the vast majority of both nations do support or do agree with the statement that Greece did assist Albania in the last 20 years, respectively 85% of Albanians and 90% of Greeks agree on that matter. But despite such agreement, we do have here a reverse perception when it comes to the bilateral economic relations between the two countries. We can understand that the Albanian citizens, 1 in 2 of them, actually believe that this has been like a win-win situation for both nations. And 4 out of 10 of them actually believe that Greece has been the one benefiting more from this economic relation between the two countries. While there is, let's say, an opposite kind of opinion from the Greek citizens who trust actually that Albania has benefited more or is the only, let's say, beneficiary out of this economical relation so far, with almost, I mean, the cumulative results here is almost 50%. And now I would like to leave the floor to my colleague Ioannis, who will deep dive in the perceived problems and the key issues on the bilateral relations.
Sorry. Thank you, Alketa. Now we are now going deeper into the core of the well, relationship or even problems and disputes between the two countries. And we wanted to elicit the opinions of the two societies, of the two public opinions about the main problems troubling relations between the two countries, or even the obstacles or challenges. And maybe unsurprisingly, we find that the two societies diverge in their perception of the main problems that are troubling this bilateral relationship. So we asked the respondents to spontaneously, without giving them any answers first, to tell us which are the main problems that they identify as obstacles or as problems in the relationship between Albania and Greece. And in the case of Albania, 3 out of 10, 30% of Albanians responded that the issue of the delimitation of the maritime zones that was mentioned, of course, previously by both Minister Dendias and Mr. Pagoulatos. So the delimitation of the maritime zones is the main problem in the views of the Albanian respondents. And then a close second comes various issues surrounding the question of the Cham population in Albania, people who lived previously in Greece, of course. And then fewer, with smaller percentages, you have questions of the state of war and other issues. So the two main issues in the eyes of the public opinion or in the eyes of the respondents in Albania are the delimitation of the maritime zones and the the issues of the Cham population. And in the case of Greece, it's interesting that neither the delimitation of the maritime zones nor the Cham issues are very visible in the Greek public opinion, or are not considered very important in the Greek public opinion. So the maritime zones, for example, is very low at 1.5%. Whereas in the case of Greek participants, there's no question that is very high in the percentage in the agenda. In fact, we find...
Nuk është se ka një problem të lartë në agjendën e tyre. Çështja që është e rëndësishme për ta është që zgjerimi i Shqipërisë. Pra ata kanë frikë që mund të kenë një projekt politik për një Shqipëri më të madhe në Balkan, 12 nga 5% e grekëve mendojnë që kjo është problem më i madh, dhe një 12% e grekëve gjithashtu mendojnë që problemi kryesor është ka të bëjë me lojalitetin grek. Pra nuk është se kemi ndonjë çështje që është elementi më i rëndësishëm këtu, me sa duket, është problematika e komunitetit Cham dhe ndarja e territoreve ujore. Bëhet disa pyetje lidhur me popullatën Cham. Fillimisht ne donim që të shikonim nëse ata anketuarit në të dy palët ishin e dini këtë çështje, pa hyrë në shumë detaje, dhe 85% e shqiptarëve e din diçka për sa përket Chamat dhe për pronat në Greqi. Në pjesa më e madhe, 58 gati 6 nga 10 grek e din që kemi çështjet e popullatës Chame. Çështja e dytë që ne ngritëm është se nëse ata konsiderojnë popullatën. Këtu kemi një marrëveshje pak a shumë. 2 nga 3 shqiptarë janë të mendimit që në fakt popullata Chame përblen një problematik në marrëdhënie e dypalëshe. Dhe disa prej tyre u përgjigjen se kjo nuk është problem, kurse në rastin e Greqisë 40% e të anketuarve thanë që kanë një problematik, kanë një pengesë në marrëdhënie e dypalëshe, që është popullata Chame. Një komentativ, për sa i përket elementit cilësor për analizën këtu, është se si kërkojnë ndjes, është se të gjithë palët mendojnë që çështja e çame është një pengesë, por trajtimi i kësaj çështje është e ndryshme, të shëtimit të qartë. Kur bëhet çështja për çështjen e palës shqiptare. Kjo ka të bëjë me të drejtat e njerëzit, kurse ka ndryshimin grek, pengesë do të ishte që ta shohim këto deklarata nga pjesëmarrësit e Shqipërisë, ose këndvështrimit të çam si të papranueshme dhe që duan të shikojnë Shqipërinë që të bëjë diçka që të mos ta ngrënë këtë çështje. Pavarësisht se këto palët e shikojnë si problem, ato nuk vjen dakord mbi analizimin e këtij problemi. Në slajdi tjetër.
Problematika tjetër ku dy shoqëritë duket se nuk bien dakord është çështja e minoritetit grek në Shqipëri dhe nëse
Albanian citizens' rights
këta qytetarë shqiptarë dhe drejtat këtyre qytetarëve shqiptarë të mbrojtura sipas nga qeveria shqiptare dhe drejtat e tyre janë mbrojtura nga qeveria shqiptare këtu.
95% of
do të themi se rreth 95% e shqiptarëve besojnë se të drejtat e grekëve në Shqipëri janë të respektuara, ndërsa 7 nga 10 grekë mendojnë të kundërtën. Ata mendojnë se të drejtat e grekëve në Shqipëri nuk prezantohen. Ne shohim pra këtu nuk respektohen, këtu shohim një nga mos marrëveshjet midis opinioneve publike.
The Greek minority.
Kjo lidhet më tepër me minoritetin grek në Shqipëri. Ne kemi bërë disa pyetje shtesë vetëm të anketuarve shqiptar, kampionit shqiptar, pra shumica e shqiptarëve nuk mendojnë, pra 85% e tyre nuk mendojnë se mendojnë grek është një kërcënim për Shqipërinë. Ata shohin minoritetin grek si një grup, por jo si kërcënim. Gjithashtu 3/4 e shqiptarëve mendojnë se marrëdhëniet midis minoritetit grek dhe mazhorancës në Shqipëri janë të mira ose shumë të mira, dhe gjithashtu ata mendojnë se qeveria shqiptare e trajton si grekët ashtu dhe shqiptarët në të njëjtën mënyrë, kështu që në përgjithësi këtu shohim që të anketuarit të shqiptarë nuk mendojnë se ka probleme madhore sa i përket minoritetit grek në Shqipëri. Sa tjetër, këtu kalojmë tek një territor ku kemi një nga gjetjet më optimiste, një problematikë, çështje që ka qenë problematikë në anketimet e shkuara, por që tashmë nuk është më problem dhe që besoj unë është bërë një nga historitë e suksesshme sa i përket dy vendeve dhe marrëdhëniet dy vendeve, dhe këtu opinioni publik në dy vendet bie dakord, dhe kjo lidhet me migrantët shqiptarë në Greqi, ose ku ne shohim se 57% e shqiptarëve mendojnë se marrëdhëniet e përgjithshme midis emigrantëve grek dhe grekëve në Greqi janë të mira, dhe gjithashtu 54% e grekëve mendojnë se marrëdhëniet midis këtyre dy grupeve janë të mira, kështu që në përgjithësi ne shohim që shumica e dy shoqërive mendojnë se marrëdhëniet midis migrantëve shqiptarë dhe grekëve në Greqi janë të mira, dhe faktikisht kjo tregon shumë më tepër prirjet pozitive që përmenda më parë, por vetëm 9% e shqiptarëve dhe 7% e grekëve mendojnë se marrëdhëniet midis këtyre dy grupeve janë të këqija. Sa tjetër, këtu edhe një herë gjetje optimiste. 97% thonë se të gjithë ata që janë përgjigjen në Shqipëri nuk mendojnë se migrantët shqiptarë në Greqi përbëjnë kërcënim për Greqinë, dhe 74% e grekëve mendojnë gjithashtu se migrantët shqiptarë nuk janë kërcënim në Greqi. Megjithatë kemi 24% që është e madhe, 1/4 e grekëve mendojnë se në një farë mënyre ka kërcënim që vjen nga migrantët shqiptarë dhe mbase kjo është një nga fushat ku ka stereotipizim në këtë pikpamje dhe për të cilat duhet punuar në të ardhmen. Slide tjetër, ju lutem. Këtu shohim më tepër të dhëna që tregojnë gjetje optimiste sa i përket integrimit të migrantëve shqiptarë në Greqi. Ne I kërkuam të interesuarve në dy vendet nëse ata mendojnë se fëmijët e migrantëve shqiptarë janë të integruar plotësisht në shoqërinë greke. Ju kujtoj të gjithëve që janë të gjithë fëmijë të brezit të parë apo të brezit të dytë migrantë që kanë jetuar shumicën e jetës së tyre në Greqi dhe janë marrin pjesë në sistemin grek të arsimit dhe thuajse 80% e shqiptarëve mendojnë se fëmijët janë tërësisht të integruar dhe 85% faktikisht e grekëve mendojnë se fëmijët e imigrantëve shqiptarë janë të integruar plotësisht në shoqëri. Slide tjetër, lutem. Dhe këtu besoj se vijoj unë gjithashtu. Kjo është pjesa e pyetësorit ku kemi kontrolluar perceptimet dhe qëndrimet dhe vlerat apo edhe stereotipet në nivel më personal, jo në përgjithësi për vendet, për shoqëritë, por se si të intervistuarit të shohin, le themi, anën tjetër në nivel individual, si shohin grekët normal apo shqiptarët normal. Këtu I kemi kërkuar të intervistuarve të na thonë në mënyrë spontane një fjalë me të cilën ata lidhen grekët në rastin e shqiptarëve dhe shqiptarët në rastin e grekëve. Dhe kemi gjetje interesante sepse pothuajse 20%, 1/5 e shqiptarëve, gjëja e parë që vjen në mendje kur I thuhet grek, ata mendojnë se janë racist apo diskriminim. Dhe kjo patjetër tregon në një farë mënyrë imazhin që kanë gjetur për shkak të përvojat të migrantëve në Greqi apo imazhin që shumë shqiptarë, jo shumica, ama kanë për grekët. Dhe gjithashtu ka dhe disa Të shohim listën, kemi disa karakterizime pozitive të mirë, pra persona pozitiv, persona të mirë, fqinj, mikpritës e të tjera. Pra, rreth 20% është negative, por nëse shohim listën më poshtë, shumica e lidhjeve janë pozitive dhe në rastin e Greqisë gjërat janë më neutrale. Nuk kemi në lidhje, gjithë themi asgjë apo neutrale për 40% të grekëve, pra nuk ka lidhje. Kjo është interesante sepse unë besoj se nëse do ta bëje këtë kampion në të para 20 vitësh, gjërat negative do të ishin shumë më të theksuara në Greqi. Faktikisht kur shohim listën, lidhja e parë spontane që I vjen grekëve është punëtor, është 10% dhe imigrantë që është 9%, që do thoja unë janë përshkruese, nuk janë konotacion negativ, agjërim negativ, por tregon që shumica e grekëve I lidhin shqiptarët me përvojat e emigracionit dhe jo me përvojat e bashkëpunëtorëve tyre apo nëse kalojmë të slide tjetër.
This is not spontaneous associations anymore, but these are options that we as researchers gave to the respondents, both positive and negative associations, and we wanted to measure to what extent the two societies give positive attributes or negative attributes to the citizens of the neighboring nation, to the members of the neighboring nation. And indeed, you will see that the two societies agree very much on this. So both Albanians see Greeks and both Greeks see Albanians in a certain way. that both sides see the other side as hardworking, as family persons. They do not see them as threat to their culture, so they don't feel threatened by their culture. But also at the same time, they do not feel that they are trustworthy or honest. So this is very interesting. It's, I would say, a Balkan story here, we have mirror, in fact, very similar, almost exactly same findings, both positive and negative of the two societies. But I would say the positive side is more salient here, in the sense that we both see each other as hardworking family people and not threatening, really. The next slide, please. And I think now it's the time for Alketa.
Yeah, thank you, Ioannis. So after the presentation of the main findings, we'd like now to close, let's say, with some key conclusions. And there are some good news, first of all, to share, which is that the relations of Albanian and Greeks have been improved in the past decades, and both nations do not see each other as a threat. Albanians view the Greek minority actually as well integrated, as part of the society, and the relations between the two, let's say the majority, the Albanian majority and the Greek minority, are perceived as good or very good. The purely negative attitudes at the personal level that Ioannis just described between the two countries have notably weakened in the last years. And furthermore, the two nations seems to associate each other with also with some positive attributes and positive values. And finally, the Albanian immigrants in Greece is not perceived anymore as a problematic target group. So the whole situation is much more, let's say, improved in this regard. Yet, there are some issues that require our attention, the attention of us as researchers, as civil society, of politicians and media, of course, in order, let's say, to further examine and follow up. The two nations, however, still continue to hold some negative opinions and stereotypes about one another, and still, let's say, they do correlate with some negative values and attributes the neighboring country. The knowledge, however, of each side holds some inaccuracy, and this is more problematic actually on the diplomatic and political level. The two sides have very different perceptions, like we saw during the findings, in regard to the problems challenging the bilateral relations. So this reverse kind of perception is a challenge per se. Albanians actually focus more on two important issues of concern about them, which is the delimitation of the maritime zones and the various issues that relates actually to the Cham population. While for the Greeks, the main problems rely on the relationship, rely on the Albanian nationalism and on the Greek minority. More specifically about the Greek minority, we saw that this was one of the let's say, most diverse opinion between the two nations. And so the Greeks in their vast majority consider that the rights of the Greek minority are violated, while there is a completely different opinion among the Albanians who do perceive that their government is doing a very good job in treating well the Greek minority. So I would like now to ask Ioannis, what are some important messages that you'd like to share with us finally, or key actions that you think are important to be taken here?
Yeah, maybe two sentences, Alketa, just so that we have enough time for the discussion and for our commentators. I think what is very clear is that we see an improvement in relations and in attitudes between the two societies. This is, as I said earlier, if you would do the same study 20 years ago, you would get a very different and very negative picture. But even 8 years ago, when we did the previous study, I think we can be clearly said that the findings were not as optimistic. So the trust between the two societies is being built very slowly, but with solid, gradual steps. And I think some of the problems of the past, like, for example, migration, Albanian migration in Greece, and to a lesser extent, the Greek minority in Albania are gradually becoming from problems, turning from problems into solutions. So rather than poisoning relations between the two countries, are gradually becoming bridges between the two countries. Some stereotypes do persist, and we need to work harder on undoing the stereotypes, like our minister, Mr. Dendias, said earlier. This is extremely important. So more work needs to be done in understanding the public opinion, in understanding these problems, in analyzing these problems. And of course, much more work needs to be, and time needs to be invested both from the governments and the politicians, but also at the level of civil society, youth groups, scholars, and so on and so forth. So a lot of homework for all of us and a lot of things that can be done in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alketa. Thank you, Ioannis, for your excellent presentation of the key findings of both surveys, but mostly for your work. The findings definitely offer food for thought. And having said that, I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Angelos Athanasopoulos, Editor-in-Chief of the Vima newspaper, for his comment. Angelos, the floor is yours.
Alexandra, thank you so much. I hope you can listen to me and you can see me. I apologize for not being able to stay with you for too long, but you know, the newspaper is a very difficult business to run, I would say. Thanks to the organizers and also to the people who work for this report, which has and contains some very interesting results for us. I would like to focus on what Ioannis and the others mentioned about, you know, the problems affecting bilateral relations between the two countries. It's interesting how we differentiate between what the Albanians think about the delimitation of maritime zones and issues of the Centrum population, while the Greeks believe that Albanian expansionism and attitudes towards the Greek minority are the main problems. Just a couple of quotes, which I hope will help the discussion, which will continue. I think that as far as the EEZ issue is concerned, I think that slowly the Greek side and even the Greek population thinks that this is a pretty technical issue with which they are not attaching so much to, while issues that have to do more with identity, like the Greek minority and mainly what has been happening with Greek real estate issues, and you know, the fact that the Rama government has been going against some of Greeks in Albania. I think that this is also the main reason why you see Albania's attitudes towards the Greek minority as one of the main issues on the Greek side. I think on the CAM issue and the fact that there is an issue with the properties, I think that there's a misunderstanding mainly on the Albanian side, because as you probably know, we have two categories of properties. One is of old Greek citizens who were accused of being, let's say, they helped the Nazis and the Italians, and then there are the CAM properties. You know, the CAMs were Greek citizens, and as far as the CAMs were Greek citizens, even if they resort to the European Court of Justice, they will not be vindicated. The problem with Greece concerns properties which belong to people of Albanian nationality. This is a critical difference which is not very well known. And on this case, I think that Greece itself as a country has been too slow to compensate or either return the properties to these people like we did with the Italians and the Germans after 1945. So there is some kind of misunderstanding. On the sub part where we are talking about the CAM issue not being recognized by Greece, I think that this belongs to the identity issues. And as you all know, identity issues are always more difficult to solve. And the Prespa agreement between Greece and North Macedonia has shown us this. They inflame passions much easier, and sometimes they are more difficult to handle than the technical issues. So as far as also the delimitation of maritime zone is concerned, this is my one before the last comment. I think that we should not rush to expect that the two countries will finally resort to the International Court of Justice. We have an initial political understanding that this could happen, but before we reach there, we have to reach a compromise. The process to reach a compromise is never easy, and there are certain issues which we will probably need to consider. Now, my last comment concerns how the two countries view the European Union. I think that this proves to me one main thing. When you are out of the EU, your desire to be part of the EU really makes you think that this is the best you can have in this world and you really want it. When you are inside, you realize that there's really a constant fight of interests between either small countries and big countries, or among big and middle-sized countries, etc. If you add to this the fact that in the Greek society, the perception after almost 10 years of economic crisis and the tough relationship we developed with the European Union, if you add this in the mix, I think that this helps you understand the gap between the percentages and the numbers we've just seen. This is from me. I hope it's helpful. I apologize that I cannot stay with you a bit more, but I would be happy if there are any questions on what I just said. I would be happy to answer them by email or any other way I am approached. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Angelos. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Blendi Kajsiu, Assistant Professor at Universidad, Antioquia, if I'm right, in Colombia. Mr. Kajsiu,
Antioquia.
Hello, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the results of such an interesting survey. I'd like to look or comment the survey from the Albanian perspective, and specifically explain a paradox, which is that in Albania, unlike in other most European countries, the people seem to be more cosmopolitan and more open than the elites, as far as Greece is concerned. Next slide, please. So normally, and this is the paradox, I mean, normally, and we've seen this in France, we've seen this in UK, in Germany, United States, one of the explanations about the emergence or the explosion of the far right or the nativist populist right in Europe and United States has been the gap between a cosmopolitan liberal elite and a people who are more xenophobic, more suspicious of foreigners. In Albania, this relation seems to be reversed as far as Greece is concerned. I couldn't argue this about other countries. It seems that on the one side, the Albanian population has a very positive perception of Greece and the Greek people, but the Albanian elites, and by elites here I mean political and media elites, seem to articulate and portray a more negative image of Greece. So this is the paradox. And the data from the survey, if we can move to the next slide, please, show this. So this is the perception of Albanians on Greece that we already saw is much more positive than one would have expected reading Albanian media, listening to Albanian politics, or living in Albania. 61% have a positive view of Greece, 85% think that Greece has assisted Albania in the last 20 years, and only 10% had a negative view of Greeks in general. So these numbers are very optimistic, as the previous colleagues also suggested. On the other hand, if we move to the next slide, we will see that the narrative about Greece in Albania is not that positive at all. And this is not a thorough research. I only looked at Panorama, which is the main newspaper in Albania. I did a simple search to identify articles on Greece, articles that were positive, that meant positive in relation to Albania. So articles that mentioned how Greece has helped Albania, how it has opened the borders for its immigrants, or how it has helped with vaccination or the EU integration. And there were negative articles which had to do with the Chami issue, the border issue, closing of the border, or other negative aspects of the relationship between Albania and Greece. And there were neutral articles where Greece appears, but without being evaluated, neither in a positive nor in a negative way. And as we can clearly see in this graph, the negative portrayal or the negative narrative is more than twice the positive one. So the portrayal or the description of Greece in the Albanian media contrasts deeply with the perception of the Albanian people. So why does this happen? And I think there are two possible explanations to this paradox. There might be others, but the two main ones are, first, if we can move to the next slide, please. This has to do with the media logic. Okay, so we know, and this is not specific to the Albanian media, but we know that for the media, bad news is good news. The media is pays always more attention to the bad phenomena, the problems, rather than to the positive phenomena. And in order to show this, I did another search in Panorama again, just looking the frequency of the good news coming from Greece compared to the bad news. Now, what's the bad news coming from Greece? Obviously, it's Golden Dawn, as far as Albania is concerned, because we know Golden Dawn is xenophobic, racist, anti-Albanian, anti-immigrant. So it's obviously very bad news for Albania and Albanians. What's the good news for Albania? It's Syriza, which is a party which is more open to immigrants. It was more prone to improve the bilateral relations. And what we see here is that the coverage of Golden Dawn in Panorama is almost triple the coverage of Syriza. So the bad news received much more space than the good news. Now, what makes this difference striking is if you take into account the electoral weight of these two parties. Golden Dawn is a small party in Greece. I mean, at its height, I think in 2012, received only 7% of the popular vote. So Golden Dawn always was a very marginal political party. Syriza, on the other hand, has much more electoral weight than Golden Dawn had. It formed a government, it received 36% of the vote. So this discrepancy does not reflect, it's completely disproportional to the importance of these two political parties in Greece, which shows us how much the Albanian media tends to portray the bad news coming from Greece more than the good news. Now, obviously, this is not a specific phenomena to the Albanian media. We see the same in France, Germany, UK. Always the far-right wing parties receive much more coverage in the media than their electoral weights. For example, if you look at the French media, the National Front of Le Pen receives much more coverage than even the Socialist Party or the big parties. But there is another aspect of Albanian media, which is specific to Albanian media, which explains why the negative image of Greece seems to be dominant in our media. Can we move to the next slide, please? So the second source of the paradox is what I call the media politicization. This basically results from the fact that the Albanian media is more like an extension of politics. It's subordinated to the economic interests that finance it. So the media owner is somebody who needs a building license, who needs whatever license or a contract from the government, and they tend to use the media in order to support certain politicians or attack other politicians. So the Albanian media, sometimes it's used to protect the businesses that finance it, and sometimes it's used to blackmail the government or the politicians in order to receive contracts from the government. This means that the Albanian media covers a lot the politics that goes on in Albania, and very, very much less it covers the social aspects of the Albanian society. It is to say that the Albanian media serves as a mirror to politics, but not as a mirror to society. So there are many social problems in Albania, from rural depopulation, from violence against women, from workers' rights. You can name a number of major social issues that receive almost no coverage in the Albanian media. And all the programming is based on political debates, what the prime minister said, what the opposition said, what this politician and the other said, which means that Greece is covered through this political lens, not through the social lens. It is always covered through what I call the political issues, the Cham issue, the border issue, but it receives far less coverage from a social perspective. The Albanian experience in Greece, the experience of the Albanians in Greece at the personal level receives almost no space in the Albanian media, which is another reason why the negative image of Greece is perpetuated, because this negative image already exists in the political debate, because the political debate focuses mainly on the problems, whether the Cham or minority issues. So in order to finalize my comments, next slide, please. So what does this mean as far as the Greek image in Albania is concerned? This means that we need to move from a political to the social dimension of the relationship between the two countries. Of course, the political and the social are intimately related. I won't enter here into an academic debate. What is the political and what is the social? By political, I simply mean the politics, and by social, I mean social experiences of the people. So in order to bridge the gap, we have to focus on the human experience, not only on the political experience, on the relation between the two peoples, not only on the relation between the two states, although the two, of course, are intimately related. What does this mean? Well, first, it could mean unearthing the old history of interaction between the two people, which is a history not only of conflict, because the conflict is everywhere. A history of conflict of how the Greeks and Albanians, and one thing that the survey shows is that there's a misperception that Albania and Greece have fought each other. And this tells you how the history has been written between the two countries, focusing on the conflict. But there's also a history of cooperation and even merging between the two peoples, which of course is very sensitive if we talk about Arvanitas and other more sensitive issues. But these are issues of cooperation, not of conflict. And second, I think more importantly, is important to tell contemporary stories of social interest that show the complex and often contradictory way in which Albanians and Greeks relate daily to each other at an individual level. Of course, there are misperceptions, of course, there are stereotypes, but of course, there is a lot of interaction, and especially in the case of Greece, there's the great majority of Greeks know an Albanian person, have relations with the Albanians. And there are a lot of beautiful stories there that the media could unearth and portray alongside the problems, of course, that the two countries face. So this could be like a couple of steps of how to improve the image of Greece in Albania, at least. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kajsiu. Thank you so much for this comment. And because the role of the media is very significant in building certain perceptions and unfortunately of not reversing stereotypes, I would like to ask whether Ioannis or Alketa have any comment on what Mr. Kajsiu has just said on Angelos' comment before.
Well, maybe, yeah, if we have time, I can say a couple of things. Well, I very much appreciated the contribution of Angelos. He's not here to hear, and I like very much I find very interesting the perspective of a senior diplomatic affairs editor. So it shows also the angle that is less societal, as Blendi was saying earlier, and more political, focusing more on foreign policy and political issues, which of course is extremely important. I don't think relations between the two countries can improve if we focus only on the political side or only on the societal side. So these things have to go hand in hand. And I agree, of course, with Blendi that we need to have more social or societal and positive stories. But of course, the political dimension, the disputes need to also the political dimension needs also to be improved, and disputes need to be resolved, because no matter how good societal relations you have, if politics are not resolved, there will always be, they will always have the capacity to poison back the societal level. So somehow this need to be in a constant negotiation towards improving relations at all levels. There is an element that I don't exactly agree entirely with Angelos when he mentioned the EU perceptions. I think there's a problem there in the case of Greece. It's not that Albanians are more pro-European or see international relations in a more cooperative terms because they're outside the club. Yes, okay, it's always better when you're outside, and when you're inside, then you realize, well, it's not exactly all rosy as you thought. But there is a real issue in the case of Greece, because Greece, mind you, we should not forget that before the crisis was one of the most pro-European and least Eurosceptic societies overall. So clearly, one thing that went wrong was the relations during the economic crisis. Of course, we can talk about the responsibility of the creditors or of our EU partners in the way they dealt with our problem. But we should also not underestimate the populism that ran through the veins of all our entire political class during the economic crisis, and in that way turned the EU from a positive story into the scapegoat for all the ills in the country. So something went wrong during the economic crisis on both sides, and I think the Greek side and the Greek political personnel, the Greek political class should also recognize their responsibility for this anti-European sentiment we see in Greece right now. But on top of that, I think all of the opinion polls we have been doing over the years with George Tsiakas and his team at the University of Macedonia show that Greeks overall are much more hostile to international relations. So, for example, you have seen in the poll, Albanian poll, and you see similar findings in the North Macedonia poll, that ordinary Albanians and ordinary citizens of North Macedonia want to have better relations with their neighbors. And they see the neighbors pretty much in a positive light. And Greeks have the exact opposite. They don't like any of the neighbors with the exception of Serbs. So this is also something wrong. And it's not that because we're in the club and the others are outside of the club. This has to do with the type of public discourse we have in Greece and the type of media we have in Greece. And it's good that Blendi Kajsiu raised the issue of media, because clearly there's a problem of media discourse and public discourse in Greece also. So to go back to the initial point, yes, Greece is understandable, more Eurosceptic, but there is also a serious problem in the stories we tell the Greek public opinion, in the way that we discuss international affairs, even in the way we discuss national interest. Why Greeks think that international affairs is all about national interest and powerful imposing their will on the weak. Part of the problem is Turkey threat, but part of the problem is also the way we discuss international politics. Check any media report of European affairs. There's so much cooperation at the European EU level, but all we hear is how Germans impose their will, how the French are taking care of their interests. It's all about interest. Well, international affairs, it's not only national interest, it's also about cooperation. So I will stop here because I talk too much, as always.
Alketa, do you have any comment? Because we have one question from the audience.
I think that Ioannis covered that very well. And so yeah, you can continue with the further question, please.
The question is a little bit a general one. Is it possible for Albania and Greece to cooperate together by leaving the past behind?
I can shortly mention here that the results were clear. We already, are having some positive opinion about each other. We think that the things have already progressed and the relations are much more positive. I guess it will be like a dream that will never come true to forget for all kinds of disputes or problems between one another, but definitely the results of the research are pretty optimistic in this regard.
Ioannis, do you have a comment? Because we have another question.
I would like to hear also what Blendi Kajsiu has to say about this. I can say in only 2 sentences, like Alketa said, things are getting better. But in order to improve, because there is still a lot of repository of hostility and stereotypes that can be mobilized anytime by any populist politician or populist media. I think all the political class on both sides need to agree that they will not be using image enemies of the other side whatever political purposes. And I think something.
Asgjë nga këto këndvështrime. Dhe duhet të flasim për media, duhet të trajtojmë media, këndvështrime e medias. Po të doja që të disa fjalë nga kolegu ynë, Blendi, sepse do të ishte shumë interesante. Do të këtë ashtu? Po, këtu jam. Pyetje shumë interesante. Përgjigja është jo. Jo, nuk mund ta lini të shkuarën pas. Do ndjeki, çështja është që e shkuara gjeneron të tashmen. Nuk është se ka ndonjë detyrë fikse. Pra, duhet të riinterpretojmë edhe në rastin e Serbisë dhe Shqipërisë. Problematika të vërtetë me serbët është lek 100, mund të jetë 100, do të duhet të rishikojmë të shkuarën. Është e vështirë sepse sidomos në Shqipëri, duke të flas për vendet e tjera, për Greqinë në këtë rast, po historia është penetruar nga linjat kombëtare, pra historia ka shërbyer më tepër për të krijuar kombë shqiptar sesa ata studiojnë ato. Natyrisht që në historinë Shqipërisë Greqia ka qenë është parë si një kërcënim, natyrisht që ka disa arsye objektive. Po kemi edhe shumë histori bashkëpunimi të një ekzistente të cilat duhet të nxjerrët në pa. Nuk është se nuk po thon të vërtetën, jo. Po është një vërtet e pjesshme. Pra duhet të shkojmë te një vërtet më komplekse. Për të parë çështjet më komplekse. Nuk është se mund të shikojmë. Nuk mund të harrojmë të shkuarën. Po të shkojmë të shkuarën jo vetëm se si të zime të palën tjetër, por se si të bashkëfitojmë të një palën tjetër. Çështja është çfarë do të bëjmë, se të shikojmë. Të shkuarën. Kemi një pyetje tjetër? Audienca? Nga
are haunting Southeast Europe.
Kur janë pikpamjen nga poshtë në lart, tregojnë më tepër lidhur me çështjen e situatës së sa politikat ashtu si rasti i Bullgarisë, Maqedonisë së Veriut. Ioannis, mbase ju përgjigjeni kësaj? Faleminderit Francesco për pyetjen. Shpresoj të jeni në rajonin tonë. Nuk besoj se ka një recetë të qartë që gjithmonë është më mirë nga poshtë lart nga lart poshtë, varet nga problemi i veçantë, momenti i veçantë, kush mund të jetë shtysa për ndryshim pozitiv dhe mund të japë shembuj të mirë të ndryshësh të pjesës tjetër këtu në rastin e
political leadership that took bold steps for reconciliation against the wishes of the societies in both countries, against the public opinion. If you see the Greek public opinion on the name dispute is hostile throughout. I mean, the public opinion is educated, of course, when you don't talk openly about the problems, or when you don't talk openly about potential wrongdoings of your own side. Of course, the public opinion is educated in a nationalist way. But for example, if you go back to 2008, almost 90% of the Greek public opinion wanted the Greek government to veto North Macedonia and North Macedonia's entry to NATO. So there is public opinion sometimes that is really hardline and do not want to see compromises. If you see Bulgaria right now, it seems to me that even the public opinion is probably more hardline than the government, or maybe I'm mistaken. So on the other side, there are cases where you see politicians not wishing to be bold and not wishing to take the lead in finding ways to reconcile with the other side, and you see spontaneous civil society initiatives, youth groups, scholars doing cross-border work. We see that a lot between Greece and North Macedonia lately. So I don't think there is a question of either only the politicians or only the grassroots level. I think both sides need to work in a certain direction, And it's good if one or the other side takes the lead when the conditions are not right for the entire spectrum or the entire political and social spectrum to follow this path. Yeah.
Well, we have another question from Mr. Marios Kolagi, if I'm saying it right. He says, I would like to ask a question in relation to an education cooperation between Albania and Greece. He says that he didn't hear from the report if there is a cooperation between the universities of Albania and Greece, and if two countries exchange students with each other, and if yes, what is the view and the opinion of the students that have taken part in this exchange? Does not matter what's the level of the study. Well, actually, maybe he would like to see whether there are, if I understand well, qualitative data regarding the cooperation about education.
Actually, I can reply to the question because the survey has been quantitative only, nationwide, like we mentioned at the beginning. And the reason why we don't have such presentation and Mr. Kolagi will not find this kind of results even in the detailed report is because it was not included in the initial questionnaire. And unfortunately, we don't have, let's say, some indirect kind of question or output from this specific polls in regard to his question, sorry.
We are running out of time anyway. We have another question about the EU accession. Do you believe that EU accession is the answer to the problems of Albania or will deteriorate the Albanian political and economical situation? Alketa, the floor.
Probably like the colleague from Greece mentioned before, when you are in the outside of the club, you feel that it's like the solution for everything. When you come in, maybe you see that you have a lot of, let's say, efforts to put in and a lot of, let's say, tasks, home tasks to undertake. I would hope for the better, definitely, but I cannot, let's say, I don't have like an answer. I don't know if Ioannis would like, let's say, to have a different opinion or share something more about?
Well, listen, the EU is not a panacea to all problems, but it does change societies. I mean, it's not gonna, like, the problem in the Balkans is that we see everything in black and white terms. Like Western Balkan people think that they will become German in a couple of years because they will join the European Union. Well, it's not gonna happen the same way that Greece did not become a Germany after 40 years being member of the EU. But if you compare what Greece was like in the 70s and the 80s, at any level imaginable, from the economy to the societal values, to the shape of our public administration and many, many other things, I think we are in a better shape. Modernization played a role. It's not only the EU, but the EU and its funds and its osmosis with other more developed nations or more developed public administrations, regimes, did help. So yeah, the EU will not change Western Balkan citizens' lives overnight, but it will improve and it will give more tools to civil society, to ordinary citizens to pressure their politicians also to do a better job. And that's why all countries, including Albania, of course, should start accession negotiations very soon, because the more Albania and North Macedonia is kept in the waiting room, the less societal forces are mobilized, or the less tools societal forces have to pressure their government for reform, for less corruption, for all the things that make these countries, our countries, more European, so to say.
We have a comment and short question from Mr. Nasser Miftari, who is a history teacher in Skopje, in North Macedonia. If the youth, he says, and the future of the two peoples, countries is the focus of discussion, then today should be the time and space for both countries, together with the European Union, to work very seriously and unreservedly to change the old mentality and the establishment of completely new sound reports. The question is, do you think now is the time to create an action strategy and implement mutual trust and complete peace between the two peoples? Alketa?
Sorry, now I'm on mute, I think, yeah. I think it's always time to start, let's say, forgetting a little bit about the past. Maybe Blendi will not agree about it. But out of this specific survey, unfortunately, we don't have like additional, let's say, insights to share with. So I don't know, I mean, probably I'm not able to reply to the question of our colleague from North Macedonia. I don't know if Ioannis or somebody else would like to jump, and yes, Andi, please.
No, thank you. Very, very quickly. I mean, because if you saw also if you see the specifics of the polling, you know, you see that the youth are more prone, you know, to more positive thinking because they come with less luggage than the old ones, you know. So I think it's right to say that, you know, in my mind, this event should be kind of a springboard of a chain events, other studies would be more specific and would give the opportunity to delve more into the opportunities, you know, for example, like what also the questions, because also the questions, despite being few, you know, they are very interesting in leading us towards like new areas to explore into more specifics, you know, like that. There have been many positive things identified by the survey, you know, like exactly what Blendi mentioned, you know, in terms of the paradox of the, you know, what the society thinks versus the elites, you know, like in terms of or relationships, etc. So I think this, in my mind, there has to be way more exploration and in-depth exploration in terms of, you know, to see what are exactly those bridges that we can build and or those bridges which are already there, but we can make them stronger, you know, like, and the areas, as I mentioned, are, I mean, you have to nurture this discussion. It's not something that should happen sporadically every 7 years, you know, like in our case, but there has to be, in fact, you know, this is one of the reasons when we're discussing with Ioannis, and this, I'm just revealing something personal, you know, like the thing is that there is so much focus on regional cooperation on the Western Balkans, etc. And when it comes to Albania, we forget, sometimes we take neighbors for granted, you know. You see the positive attitudes towards Italy, the positive attitudes of people towards Greece, you know, and this should not happen, you know, like there has to be also a nurturing of this relationship, you know, because as it was mentioned here by Ioannis, you know, like there are lots of, I would say, you know, predator politics out there who can use the old tank, you know, like that fuels divisive policies and divisive language and racist, etc., you know. So creating this kind of forums and creating this kind of forums for discussions, I think should be only the first step, which should include then, you know, the youth, universities, academia, etc., media, which was very, you know, which came up here as one of the most problematic issues, you know. If you see, like, you know, how many, if you ask, I mean, I'll be very interested to know how many Albanian journalists have gone to Greece or vice versa, you know, for example, because I think those are also like kind of some bridges that help, you know, like dispel the conspiracy theories, the myths that we like to live so much with, you know, etc. So I think there is plenty to do, you know. The thing is not to leave it here, but to make sure that there is a sustainable and consistent exploration of these issues, you know, and not leave them to ad hoc approaches, like, or whenever there is something, you know, bombastic or tabloid, you know, interesting enough for tabloids, you know. So I think we should fill the space that tabloids and other media is feeling like mercilessly, you know. So this is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobrushi. Thank you, Andi. And I totally agree with you. I'm a journalist, and as long as you travel to your neighboring countries, you understand more. You have to give voice to the people living in your neighboring countries, and to better understand the problems and to report them afterwards, not just take the narrative from your own country and the perspective. That could be always a solution. Now, I would like to ask whether Mr. Bouzis would like to make a concluding remark and to give the floor again to Alketa and Ioannis for the final comments. Is Mr. Bouzis with us?
Yes, I'm still here, and you insist about the name. So, what I would really like to
I'm so sorry, Mr. Bouzis.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm just kidding. I have to agree that we have to sort of institutionalize this kind of research. As I mentioned before, I consider such researches, such polls, to be valuable tools. So if we can keep this one here, and we note that we already have some improvements, we could keep this simultaneous polls, those simultaneous polls as a reference, and try to have almost the same, or at least stuff that can be compared to one with the other. And we should have, I think, research like that, polls like that every 2 or 3 years, so that we can make the comparisons. And we could draw really precious conclusions out of those. That's my most important conclusion out of this, out of today's discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Bouzis, again, apologize for pronouncing
it. It's okay.
Everybody
does that. Everybody does that.
Thank you so much. It is really worth it that a diplomat from the Greek embassy in Tirana is still with us in this event. I would like to give now the floor to Alketa for her final comment, and then to Ioannis.
Thank you, Alexandra. Continuing exactly what Andi's comment was about, I think that both the surveys that we have conducted and the today event show how high interest there is on the bilateral relations between Albania and Greece, but as well on the strong, let's say, need there is in order for us to understand this real perception, to follow up how these are progressing, and to find, let's say, the way how we as researchers can impact, let's say, the policies and the politics, and hopefully even the media.
Okay, thank you so much. Ioannis. Ioannis?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything that has been said. And of course, with things that were mentioned by Andi, we have discussed these things before several times. I think there is I agree with Mr. Bouzis very much. We don't have enough data. We don't have enough material to work on to understand this complex relationship. I should say that the relationship between Albanians and Greeks, I would say more general, not only Albania, Greece, because we have Kosovo, we have the Albanians in North Macedonia, where I'm sitting now at the moment, is probably one of the most complicated, most historical, but most complicated, but also most promising relationships in the region. Serbs and Albanians is another one, I would say. But we need more material. We need more understanding of these issues, and we need bold moves in the direction of creating platforms, initiatives, all sorts of things that could bring at various levels the two societies closer, because they are closer in many ways, except maybe not the mindset, but the stereotypes that exist, and possibly the politics. And there is too many entrepreneurs, political agents that want to mobilize hostility between the two societies for their own purposes. But at the same time, there's so much historical, cultural, economic connections and affinities between the two societies. We just need to mobilize this efforts, and especially the youth. I mean, I go back to what I said earlier. The Albanian youth in Greece, Albanian origin youth in Greece, because they are like us nowadays, you cannot recognize the difference, is a great bridge between the two societies. And I would say the Greek minority also is a great bridge between the two societies. We just need to facilitate all these initiatives and platforms that will bring the two societies closer. And I would say, call me optimistic, but if these two societies, if the Greeks and Albanians work better together, this will be a driver for the entire region. You don't need to go to Serbia or to Croatia or to, I don't know where, to Bulgaria, to Sofia to find the driver for the future of the region. I think this triangle here, Athens, Tirana, Pristina, bit of Skopje, can be the driver for positive change in the region. And with that, I will close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ioannis. Thank you all for attention. Thanks to all the participants. Let's hope that there will be more surveys in the future. Their findings, as we have seen, help a lot. People working in the media, people in civil society, and mostly people in governments to better understand key aspects of the bilateral relations. And let's hope the next surveys to take place very soon, perhaps coinciding with the beginning of Albania's talks with the EU. Things will definitely change for the bilateral relations and between the two peoples when this happens, and we all hope that this will happen very soon. So thank you all for your participation.